Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe.
Hello and welcome everybody to yet another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. I'm your host, Jason Walls from QA Cafe, and today I have Anthony James from Extrahop, who actually is way more connected to me and the things that I used to do in ways that I had no idea until we started talking just the other day.
Yep.
As always, this show is brought to you by my employers at QA Cafe, and thus the opinions expressed by myself or Anthony do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership, and the same goes for Extrahop. And that I am allowed to be here because of the success of the three great products that we have at QA Cafe, including CD Router, the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi devices, and other customer premises equipment. CloudShark Enterprise, which is the way to deploy packet analysis in an enterprise-grade manner across your entire organization in an easily deployable way in a number of different use cases that makes your whole life easier for the mountains and mountains of packet capture data that you probably have. And last but not least, Packet Viewer, which allows you to add Wireshark functionality directly to your web-based cloud-managed networking or cybersecurity solution. All right. Hi, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, I was just, when we were talking last week, there were so many things. I'm like, wait, no, hold that thought. Wait, no, that's really great. Hold that thought. We need to talk about that today.
Happy to.
But so it's, I talked about the format of the show a little bit before. Like, this is all about humanizing the real people that make the internet go. And so I like to sort of talk about how it is that we got here, very often by accident, right? Even if you're in engineering, getting into networking specifically is rarely on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
But yeah, what is your story about that? We can talk about the stuff that we talked about before
I got stories for days. I can keep you going. Mine's not unlike a lot of people I meet in the industry who are in my kind of era of age. When we started out back I was started out as a software developer, graduating college in Australia back, I can't even remember how long ago, but it was in the 90s. In fact, I studied COBOL. That was my graduate code base. And kind of got thrust into networking accidentally. My first job was doing technical support for the employees of a bank, just doing IT desk stuff. And at that time, everything was not Windows. It was all, character-based systems. And I was rewriting print drivers because a lot of times they would fail. And that was my job. I get called to someone's desk and they can't print. And it was just a print driver. It was corrupt and I had to rewrite it. And so that was...
And people are still doing that job today because printers are the worst thing that we own. They are the worst piece of equipment that still exists.
Funny adjunct story. My brother-in-law is still doing printer repair today. That's his job. He still does it. It's amazing. They're not so disposable as we thought they were.
No, they're just the last thing that still has moving parts. I mean, we killed hard drives. Yeah.
And if you've ever bought a car recently, they still have, the dot matrix printers. So I kind of went through that world of doing support, and I got fascinated because the bank I was working at in Sydney had a network-based operating system. I'm going to throw out a name there that some of your viewers or listeners may or may not know, called Banyan Vines. It was it was a competitor at the time to Novell NetWare. And again, some people may know this, may not. This is the predecessor to all networking operating systems that we have today, like Windows and Linux and others. And so there was this war going on about who would be the right one. But the bank that I was in, we were doing this ability to connect computers together over this IP-based network. And I was fascinated. And so I kind of went from doing rewriting print drivers to sitting with the network admins, like, well, how did you create that user? And how do I access that server? And kind of got like just through osmosis and kind of buddying up to the right folks that I got access to that stuff. And then all of a sudden, where, the intersection with what you've been doing and where my life kind of led me to is a lot of times we'd have to troubleshoot the network. And I got so many fun stories about that. But they had a product called a Sniffer. Mm-hmm. And so we had a Sniffer in the bank. And there was this big piece of heavy equipment that was like a luggable. We didn't.
Yeah, it's got like a handle, right?
A handle, yeah. and it needed to be plugged into a power outlet. You couldn't. There was no battery back then that could power these things. So I'd take my luggable to the different branches around the bank and try to troubleshoot networks when they were having outages. And it was just you plug into, at that time it was a coaxial cable. So I had a BNC connector on the back, a T BNC connector. I'd disconnect the segment, plug it in, turn it on, and start watching packets fly. And that was where my life began really in networking, and I started doing troubleshooting, and that whole life exploded into troubleshooting around the world, all types of networks. And some of your listeners may know, started out doing just standard-based coaxial Ethernet, then token ring, then FDDI, then ATM. Then I was in ISDN networks. I was in V35 WAN networks. It was just this really interesting world.
I actually don't think a lot of kids these days know that Ethernet was
Probably
originally
not.
over coax. Were you like working with like vampire taps? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
A lot of them were the coaxial. Like, if you ever gone, if your listeners have like any grandparents with old televisions, they have that little BNC, little like connector that twists on, twists off. That was what we were using back then on the smaller thin Ethernets. The big vampire taps were for, and I won't get into the very technical stuff, this coaxial networking equipment that was thick, heavy coax. And you had to like have this screw to go down to pierce the shielding into the core to get access to the data. It's just such a different world back then.
And it's like, yes, there were that people thought that was a good idea at the time.
Yeah, but what's funny, a really good connective tissue between that world and today. On that experience, even though I was going through this really weird cabling, this coaxial cabling that you might see on the back of an antenna. In fact, if you get a modern day TV today and it has the antenna connector on the back, that connector that looks kind of weird, that's a BNC connector.
Right.
And that's what
And it's like I'm actually like kicking myself because it's very frustrating to try to set up old video game systems now on new TVs, right? Because that's all you
that's
have,
what we had.
and
Yeah,
the HDMI to RF converters are really expensive. Like,
yeah, yeah. But the connective tissue between that world and this world is they were all packets. Even though I was using this really weird cabling system to today, where you plug something into, an RJ45, it was still packets. It was still
Mhm.
formatted the same. It was still Ethernet, although there were different types of technologies, but Ethernet won the war. It was still packets. And so what we were doing was looking at packets traveling over this coaxial cable versus packets traveling through a switch today. Same thing. They were
Yeah.
all formatted the
Yeah.
same. They all had the same stuff inside them. It was just a different medium to transport them.
Right. Yeah, and it's to fast forward people, and we talked a little bit about this before about how so like Ethernet. There's a reason why it won the war,
Yeah.
and there are many things that we've had to do since then to mitigate the fact that it didn't win the war for certain use cases.
Right.
Um, but the original idea behind Ethernet was trying to transmit data over a shared medium
That's
when you
right.
had multiple talkers, right? Ironically, they just got rid of that problem
Yeah.
for wired Ethernet. They just got rid of that problem.
Yeah.
But they preserved the concept for wireless, and Wi-Fi now works because we
Oh,
had that original old Ethernet technology.
yeah, absolutely. I think we spoke about this on our pre-call. Is I remember back in the day, so fast forward my career, I ended up using this Sniffer product in the bank. I was so in love with the product, I ended up working for the company. Network General was the name back in the 90s, who built the first ever Sniffer products. A bunch of other competitors kind of spawned out and did their own thing. And I worked as an SE kind of in that world just because I really enjoyed the product. And at that time, we were going through this transition from coax to structured wiring, as we know now, RJ45s and Cat6, Cat7, whatever it is. And I remember arguing for the reason that shared medium is better. And I wrote a paper. It's probably not out there anymore, but it was the benefit of CSMACD, the carrier
Yeah,
sensor multiple access with collision detection, and why it was so valuable. In retrospect, it wasn't. But as you say, that transitioned to Wi-Fi, and it makes Wi-Fi
and
useful.
and
And yeah, cell phones, like cell service, because you have this one pool of medium that everyone's communicating with, and you have to have a way they're not colliding with each other, and that's what the technology became. So it was
yeah.
kind of the grandfather of that wireless innovation. But
Right.
back then I was arguing like, you don't want structured wiring, you need this stuff. So
So everybody get your hubs out.
yeah,
They're still
yeah.
valuable,
That was funny.
which is another irony because as a result of going down the route of not having a shared medium, it made sniffing harder,
Oh
right?
my God. Oh, even I got so many stories around this. Now I'll go back to some of the stories that I was mentioning back before the call. My house. So I'm like most people. I work from home now since COVID, and we have I don't know how many devices. I'm a tech guy, so even behind me you have a flight simulator rig back here. I've got my fans that are smart fans, or obviously all of our light switches, and so at one point as I'm working from home, I'm getting these network grayouts, and having Zoom is a hard time. So I did what most people would do in my situation. I wired the entire house for actual Cat 6E. I ran cables everywhere, terminated them all myself, and I still was having issues. I'm like, what is going on? You know how I solved it? A sniffer, plugged it into my network, but I'm on a switched infrastructure. I'm like, how do I do this? So I end up going and buying a Netgear managed switch with a span port in my house, plugging in a computer, loading up a sniffer program, and come to realize I had this little TP link box that I had set up at one point to be a bridge for a network, and it was racing DHCP against my actual
Yeah.
router. Like,
If I had to have a list of the top
oh
three
my God,
problems, that would be on it. That'd
that
be
was
on it. It happened just the other day to my wife at her at the restaurant that she's helping to run because some
yep,
other guy had set up the network ages ago, and
right.
we couldn't get this order printer thing to connect, right? And I was like, I bet it's because it's on the wrong network. And I
Yeah.
go upstairs, and there, lo and behold, there's two routers there, one
Yeah,
connected into the other.
they're both running DHCP on different networks.
Hmm.
That took me honestly. I'll be on Zoom calls, they drop out, and it took me a month. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back to what I did back in the '90s. I'm going to sniff this network. And sure enough, I had to go and buy a span port switch. It wasn't that expensive. It was like a
Right, right.
10 port, gigabit Ethernet switch, and it did the trick. So packets tell the truth, man. I tell everyone that. People don't believe I still do this, but I have a sniffer loaded on my desktops all the time.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. It's interesting just to put a pin in that because um, packets are the truth. They are
Yeah.
the truth, and it is. I've talked to a lot of the Wireshark people about this. Chris Greer and Gerald, the inventor of Wireshark, right? About
Yeah.
how the knowledge about it is kind of esoteric, right?
Yes.
Like to really know,
Yeah.
but everybody needs them, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone needs them.
Absolutely.
Um, and it's such a weird it's such a weird niche from the consumer's perspective, right? Because there's people like you and I who
Yeah.
know these things and would go about solving the problems that way,
Yep.
and would go about actually wiring their house
Yeah.
with
Everywhere.
cat
Every
six,
room now.
But I can't. I'm not allowed to drill any more holes. So like, my teenagers always complaining about the Wi-Fi in her room. I'm like, well, I could just run a cable over there.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
spent that summer under the
but
house, by the way.
it's weird. Like, I was use Ubiquity as the example because they kind of occupy this weird like place on the fence between two worlds because they give very advanced functionality to people who are just buying residential routers, and they
Yeah.
added packet capture to their home, to their consumer gateway products. I was like, interesting
I love
choice.
it.
That's so you can go in and actually do
I love
do
it.
a peek at it.
I love it. It's just, it's the right thing to do. It's like, I tell people about this if they don't understand. Like, when your car, you get the check engine light, and what do? You take it to a technician. There's a thing called an ODB2 port that you can plug in, and you can get software packages that tells you the code and what it means. That's what a sniffer does for you. It's like your network's having issue. You don't just call a tech. You can plug in this thing, and a sniffer's going to tell you. But you do
Hmm.
have to know how to read it. That's true. It's not.
Right.
It's not just going to put on the screen, oh, you've got a second DHCP server. Like, no, you've got to figure that out.
For now, right?
For
For
now,
now.
yeah. But we talked about stories of using sniffers. I've got so many stories. So back to how I got into networking is, now I'm working for this. I actually, before I joined the company, Network General, I was working for a distributor, and I became an expert in just doing packet analysis. And so I was in Sydney being sent around Asia Pacific. And so we got this one call. I had to go to the Philippines, and they were having trouble with the satellite connection coming into the Philippines for the internet. This is circa 98. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I get contracted out by a French company called ZaxSat. They were providing the satellite connection, but the country or Manila, the Philippines, were complaining the internet was giving brownouts and there was some connective issues. And so they contract me out. I fly out from Sydney to Manila, and I get there. It's like 10 o'clock, but my contact from France is getting in around midnight. And so I'm waiting at the airport with this luggable, this big piece of equipment, and it's just an old dinosaur thing. And you have to plug it into an outlet. You can't power it on. It has a fold-down keyboard and a little, CRT screen on the front, and that's how you operate it. And in the back is where you plug in your network adapters that are specialized to be able to tap a network. And I had everything that I needed because I was going to plug in between a satellite terminator and a Cisco router. So I'm like, okay, I know what that is. It's going to be a particular type of E35 connector. And I've got what we call at that point, people can look it up, an octopus cable, where it has all these like pieces on the back and terrible things. Anyway, so I'm there. This guy shows up at midnight, and I'm not really sure where I'm going and what I'm doing. I just know I've got my sniffer. I've got my bag full of clothes for about a week. And he's like, okay, we're going to go to the site. And I'm thinking, we're at the airport. It's not going to be long. He's like, well, it's going to take about 2.5 hours to get there. I'm like, what? It's midnight.
And it was already midnight?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, sure. I'm in my 20s. I'm like, whatever. So we get in a cab. This cab's taking us. He doesn't have a ride. He's got a cab. And then we start riding, and we're going into what I think is a jungle. Like, I don't know where I am. And we're just going into darkness and forest. Okay. And
you're like, I've seen movies start this way.
Well, it got worse. We got to about an hour or so in, and we get stopped. The taxi driver pulls over in the middle of nowhere. I remember it distinctly. There's jungle either side of the road, and there's looks like a bridge over the top. We just stop there. And he's like, okay, everyone get out of the car. I'm like, all right. So, and my contact's like, it's fine. This happens all the time. We're just going to show some equipment. Like, okay. So we get out of the car. Out of nowhere, about 3 or 4, 5 people come out with they had semi-automatic rifles, just whatever. And they just roll up in civilian clothes. And there's this old woman. I'll never forget it. She just reminded me of an old woman from a movie, and just kind of walks up with a notebook and a pen. And she's like, show me what you have. I'm like, okay. So we pop the trunk, and I've got this luggable. It's called a Dolch back in the day. And she's like, okay, turn it on. I'm like, I can't turn it on. It has this AC power adapter. I've got to plug it in somewhere. It doesn't just get turned on. She's like, oh, take it apart. I'm like, what? Like, this is at that point in time, very expensive piece of equipment. Every network adapter was worth multiple thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Thing itself was worth thousands. This is like a $50,000, $60,000 piece of equipment back in the 90s. I'm like, well, I did have stuff to take it apart because sometimes I had to take adapters out and reseat them. I'm like, okay, I've got no static strap. This is not a sterile environment. I don't know if I'm going to zap these cards or not. So I'm literally taking the back off the Dolch in a trunk of a taxi.
In the dark.
In the dark, yeah. They had flashlights, and I pull out the network adapters, and she's like, find me the serial number. So I'm like, and I had to write down every serial number in a notebook, put them back together.
Were they like customs? Was this like an import problem?
So I didn't know what it was. What it turns out to be is we were going to Subic Bay, which is a military trade-free zone. So I didn't know this. So I'm like, this is weird. This is like, I don't really know what to do here. So I come to find out, whatever you bring in, you have to take out. Otherwise you can be fined, because it is a trade-free. You're not allowed to trade there. It's all for the military, and it's all to support, the country. And so I'm freaking out. We finally put everything back. We get in the car. We get to our place. It's like 2:00 in the morning. And then as we get to the place, there's a hotel right next to this satellite area. It was like a concrete cube with a couple of giant dishes on top. And my contact's like, okay, now you're going to go to the hotel. Tomorrow we're going to pick you up. We're going to have armed guards, and you're going to be transported everywhere under support for an armed guard. Like, where the hell did you take me? So I ended up sitting there I couldn't leave the compound. We had to be supported and escorted everywhere. And ended up getting to the networking story of this. So I go into this concrete building. There's no windows. It's just this dark, dark place. And they're like, okay, the problem is the satellite is not giving us the right communications. We're getting slow, intermittent problems. And so I'm like, okay, well, I need to schedule an outage for the internet for this whole country. So we schedule an outage. It was really quick, and we just insert the octopus cable. I think it was a V35 connector at that point. And so we insert the cable. So now we've tapped into the giant connectors that go from the satellite terminator to the Cisco router. And if your listeners or viewers want to look up the terminology, it was a T1 connection, which is 1.54 megabits per second back in the day, right? So I'm plugging in my sniffer, I'm watching, and all I'm seeing is retransmission. Again, back to packets, I'm seeing TCP, it retransmits, and it's all the time. Like, okay, we got a synchronization problem here between whatever your terminator is doing on your satellite and whatever the Cisco router is trying to do. There's something going on here. And so I started looking a little closer, and I asked the satellite tech, like, what have you got configured on this box? He's like, oh, it's configured for E1. I'm like, wait, what? E1, the European standard, which is a 2.048 speed on a Cisco router, which is a T1, which is a 1.54 speed. I think we got a problem here. He's like, oh, no, I fixed it. I'm like, how'd you fix it? He's like, well, I went into the Cisco router and told it was an E1. Like, that doesn't work that way.
You can't change.
The actual hardware crystal, there's a crystal in there that does timing, doesn't change. You can get a different card, an E1 card. So long story short, after all of that getting in and getting out of Manila and the jungle stop, it was basically someone had misconfigured a router because they wanted to go faster.
Wow. That's like one of those, this could be handled by an email.
Yeah. And so I'm like, in 2 days, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm going to pack up. I'm taking my stuff and I'm going to go. He's like, can you leave the sniffer here? I'm like, no. I
was just explicitly told I cannot do that.
So we ended up calling someone in the Manila Philippines government. Like, can we leave and get a document to say we've left it here for research purposes, not for trade? And so I had to have all this stuff done, but we left it there, and so it was a fun experience.
That's totally unnerving. Like, by yourself, and you were in your 20s, like.
Yeah. I had so many of those. So I did another one. I don't know if you want me to keep talking about this stuff because it goes on forever.
No, this is, funny story. When we started this show, like, I started the idea for this show started with two other friends of mine who I both know through broadband and that sort of thing. And it came up because we were in the bar talking about field tech stories.
Well, a lot of people know my stories from sitting in a bar at a conference, like, oh yeah, let me tell you about some stuff I had in my early career. So another one, I was in, well, there's a couple of these, but I was in Australia, and same thing. I was a network engineer with a sniffer, and we had a mining company, contractors, and they're like, hey, we got some problems with our networking equipment in this mining facility in a place called North Parks outside of New South Wales, outside of Sydney. But it's in kind of like, if you think of Australia, desert-ish area, it's kind of like that. It's in the middle of nowhere back in the 90s. Yeah. And so
you mean from our perspective in the US, the place where everything can kill you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I grew up with that stuff.
We were just joking about the Bluey episode, not the Bluey episode. There's a Peppa Pig episode.
Okay.
That they had to cut from Australian TV because it's the one where they teach you that spiders are your friends.
Oh, I got plenty of stories about spiders. My wife grew up in California, and she's gone back and visited my family a few times. She doesn't like it as much. Australia's a great place, but she's freaked out about spiders and snakes and whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere. So I get consulted, and it's a drivable for me. So it's like going out into the bush, but it's a good 5-6 hour drive, maybe 7 hour drive from where I was living. Like, okay, well, I'll just drive out there. There was no real easy transport anyway. And so I get to this place and meet the contact, and the contact's like, okay, we're trying to troubleshoot. We have some equipment down in the mine shaft that is failing communicating to the stuff up top, and we need it. I'm like, what? Okay. So he's like, we need you to come down the mine shaft and figure out why the equipment's failing. And it was all Ethernet. Again, I'll throw out another technical kind of technology that people won't remember, but 10 base FL, which was 10 megabits Ethernet over fiber optic. Some of your people might look that up. 10 base FL. Yeah, it was back if you wanted to go longer than coax, because coax had a limit of size. It was 185 meters, or
right.
We call it 10 base 2 because we rounded it up. But 10 base FL could go a lot longer because it was fiber optic connection, still running 10 megabit Ethernet. And so I'm like, okay, I had a 10 base FL adapter I could plug into my Sniffer. I'm like, yeah, I can help you out. I'm thinking I'm going to be up on top where this stuff's running to and looking at whatever the equipment they want me to look at. Like, no, you got to go down the mine shaft. So he's like, come back tomorrow. We're going to start around 7 a.m. and we'll kind of get moving. I'm like, okay. So I get there, and then they're like, okay, first of all, you're going to go and get suited up. I'm like, what do you mean suited up? It's like, no, you have to wear mining equipment. You're going to have emergency gear. You're going to have an oxygen tank. You're going to have a mask. You're going to have a light. You're going to have a helmet, boots, everything. Like, I'm the technician. Why would I need this? Well, in case you get stuck, in case the mine.
No, I'm out. I'm
a 20-year-old Australian. Like, I don't. Yeah, sure, let's do this. So I get geared up, and I've got everything I need. And he's like, okay, we're going to put you in the back of a pickup truck with your highly sensitive equipment. And we drive down the mine shaft. I'm like, well, what do you mean we drive down? He's like, oh, it's big enough for a car to drive all the way down. Okay. So I'm in the back of this pickup truck, and we're driving, and it's 1 kilometer, which is less than a mile. It's like, a little bit shy of 3/4 of a mile. Straight down, but we have to drive down this road. And so we're driving down, and I've never witnessed darkness in my entire life until I got probably about 10 minutes into this ride. It was about a 40-minute ride down this mine shaft. And there's lack of light. Lack of light is something that's surreal to me when you get to that level of darkness. And they don't turn their headlights on, so there's nothing around me. They had this other low light where they could see where they're driving without like shining everywhere, because they didn't want all the reflection from the walls. Right. And so we're kind of driving down, and I'm in the back looking at absolutely nothing. And every now and then they had this cutout in the wall where they'd pull over. I'm like, okay. And then there's this big piece of a mining equipment would just go by, and then they pull back out and they keep going. This went on for a good half hour. And so we finally get to the bottom of this area, what I assume is a parking lot. And everyone turns on their lights on their shoulder or their helmet. I'm like, okay, get out of the truck. And my guide's like, whatever you do, don't walk anywhere. Just follow me or someone like me. He's like, this is not a tourist destination. You could walk 3 steps and fall 100 feet down a mine shaft that was cut for exploratory. There's no guardrail. There's no sign. It's just what we have to know. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I follow the guide, and we get to it's one of those like makeshift buildings. It's almost like those portable buildings they have on a site. But it was 2-story. Somehow they got this 2-story construction of this makeshift building in this mine shaft. And it wasn't huge. It was like a stairwell up, and it was like constructed stairs. It was just, a scaffolding kind of thing. So I get inside. And the first room I walked through, this was the most interesting thing I can remember. It looked like
this was the most interesting.
Oh, it gets fun. There were 6 chairs that looked like dentist chairs. On one side, they had a computer screen. On the other side, they had a TV and they had a keyboard. No one was in them, but that's what they had in this room. And I'm like, what is this?
Am I in the Matrix?
Yeah, so that this was in at the time back in the 90s, the first ever fully automated mining equipment. And so they had a camera on that thing that went by that was this big piece of giant equipment. They had a camera on it and it was computer controlled. But everyone who did the controlling also had to be a miner and use the equipment in case it failed. They go out and they'd manually do it. And so I walked through this room like, this is the weirdest thing I've seen to manage this giant piece of equipment. And then we go up to the second level, and there's all these computer terminal, a couple of computer terminals. And what I kind of find out were management terminals for all of the stuff that was running down there. And then it all reported up to a station upstairs, and that's where they ran their 10-base fiber connector. And so it was a really simple problem. So that's the story, because the problem was so easy. So again, I plug in.
Just like a configuration problem on a
yeah, I plug in and I plug into the 10-base FL connector, and sure enough, I'm seeing retransmissions. Like story of our life, right? Any performance issue you get is a retransmission problem. So I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to figure out, is it a network stack problem? And I've had problems where people loaded the wrong drivers and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, looks legit, and I checked the drivers because I was a coder, so it looked good. And all of a sudden, I felt this rumble. I'm like, what's that? Like, oh, we're blasting just down here, and it shakes the building. I'm like, huh, okay. Looking at the computer, it was an old computer sitting on a desk directly on the floor, directly on the mine shaft floor. Like, let me run a defrag on the hard drive. Oh yeah, it was completely hosed. The hard drive was just shaking too much.
Yeah.
Like, can you put some like?
That's so funny that we were just talking about that too, because it's just because it's still got an arm on it.
Yeah,
right.
That's all it was. And so we ended up putting some cushioning under the computer, and I fixed it from there. I'm like, okay, you guys need to make this more stable, but you need to cushion this thing from the blast, because the hard drive, the arm is shaking and it's using software and it's failing. So the Ethernet packets are trying to find something that isn't there yet because it hasn't retrieved the data. That's all that's going on.
Right.
So we end up fixing that. This was
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And this was all on this, like 90% of all the information you're getting is on this Sniffer.
On the Dolch. Yeah, it was on the Sniffer. The Sniffer told me that the application's retransmissions are causing the failure. And it was just a process of elimination. Are the drivers right? I checked those. Is the software right? I checked those. What about the physical equipment? Yeah, it's shaking the hard drive. Okay, that's going to be a problem.
Wow. Did you ever see the XKCD comic talking about the troubleshooting process when somebody asks you to fix their computer problem?
No.
And you're like, and it's basically like, look, I honestly have no idea how this piece of software that you were looking at works, but this is what I'm doing. And it's just like this flowchart that's very simple. And it's like, if you just did this, you could probably solve most of the things that I...
Yeah. Oh, I have one at the bank. This is a shorter story. And this is a great endorsement for Sniffers. We had this gray out. It was like it was consistent. It was like either once a month. I think it was once a month on a Friday, right before the end of the month. And all of a sudden, the entire coaxial segment of one part of the network would just go gray, and just people couldn't communicate. And so we went after this for 6 months. We plug in a sniffer. We come to find out the pattern, what time, what day, when in the month. And so we figured out, okay, it's this Friday of the month, and it's going to happen again. So we plug in the sniffer, and sure enough, we just see these bursts of retransmissions. And so there's a rule in coax troubleshooting: is divide and conquer. So you split the segment in half, you put a terminator on both sides, and you sniff half the side, which one's causing the issue, and then you just divide until you get down to the smallest segment, and then you can figure it out.
Yep.
So we were doing the divide and conquer, and there was one side of the segment that was failing, and you didn't have enough time to do more. And so we'd get like, okay, we were at this point, next Friday happens, we're going to get to this point. And so we finally get down to, you'll not believe this, we finally get down to the problem. So it was one person. They come in on this Friday. I think it was a salesperson at the bank doing mortgages or whatever, and they'd be out in the field most of the time, but they'd come back, and on their desk, they were the end of the coaxial run. And you could see the coax come into the back of the computer, and the terminator on the other side, which is this little cap on the coax, that guy would, when he was on the phone, take it off, play with it, put it back on, take it off, play with it, put it back on. So yeah, we witnessed this guy breaking the network just because he was on the phone taking off
He
the
was
terminator
fidgeting.
and fidgeting with it. But the sniffer got us to like, where do we go? And we got us to that point, like, don't do that.
He just here's a stress ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Network outages caused by someone's
Oh, that's
stress
so
device.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. And it's cool though. And like it's interesting to me because like so oh actually that was one of my questions. The Dulce that you had,
Yeah.
like did you have the same one throughout most of your career? Was it like you and your friend at this point, or was
No,
it like
I had first one I had was a Toshiba laptop where the keyboard the screen folded up, and it
Mhm.
was like a briefcase looking thing, and then the Dolce became the one, but then we had a few of them. But yeah, the Dolce itself, not one particular one, became my best friend everywhere I
I was
went.
gonna say like it's had
Oh,
many adventures, this guy.
yeah, I went into a brewery with
Yeah.
one. I was troubleshooting PLC based controllers that controlled all the brewing equipment. Same thing. It was the Dolce helped me. That was a fun time because I figured it out early, but then I didn't tell everyone for another couple of days because they would give me beer at lunch. So I just troubleshooting.
You're like, yeah, no, I just gotta
I got more to
look
do.
at it a little bit longer.
The break room had taps all around, and you could just any morning break, lunch break, afternoon break, you could pour any beer you want, and that's all it was. So I was a
That's
20-year-old. Like, yeah, I haven't figured it out today. Let's come back tomorrow.
that's so great. It got me thinking though, and this is kind of a pattern that I've seen, that ends up being, basically the subject of our lives is the softwareization of things, right?
Yeah,
Which comes from the standardization of things,
right.
right? And so the need to have all that specialized equipment, to have people have to go on site, to do all those things, has slowly been erased over time, because of standardization,
Yeah.
right? And now in situations like with Extrahop, it's like all of the stuff that you guys are developing is doing the same kinds of things and solving the same problems, but it's all way up here,
Yes.
right? There's no need to go down here anymore, except for the fact that you still need the packet captures,
I was going to
right?
say the fun thing about that is it starts with packets. Like
Hmm.
even we're providing the most insightful elements of attackers going laterally through the network, or we're detecting very sophisticated adversaries. It's all from packets, right? You can't assume that level of confidence about an attack because you're getting statistical data out of a switch or looking at headers of packets. You've got to get inside there and figure out what's inside this thing.
Right.
And it's a softwareization can now scale that. Like imagine someone like me back in the 90s with a Dolch plugging into a network looking for an attacker. The amount of data you've got to sift through looking at packets would just be years to find
Right, right,
one element of an attack versus, like you say, softwareization has dramatically accelerated that ability, but still based on packets.
right. And it's just cool because now it's like it's you still have to rely on the packets, but it's in a totally not really a different way, but you now can do way more than you could with them
Oh,
before
absolutely.
too,
Yeah,
right?
the
It's
scale is
like, and
huge.
so there's plenty of solutions out there where, okay, you're just looking at logs or whatever, but there are very many ways. It's like the packets are what happened,
Yep.
right? It's
Period.
like you said, right? They're
It's
what happened.
we like to say, and I didn't use this in my early career, but I like to say here it's the immutable truth.
Mm,
You can't fake them. You can't
right.
alter them.
Oh
Whatever's
yeah,
running
right.
across the wire is what is actually happening.
You can hide stuff in them, but that's kind
Yeah.
of the point,
But if
right?
you've got
That's
the
why you can't
packet,
rely on those other things.
right? But if you've got the packet, you can retrieve it.
Hmm.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you eat like one of the things that's very interesting to me, um, having gone through this process myself going into networking, but still kind of trying to keep an open mind of what things used to be like, right?
yep.
Uh, is the accessibility of it, right? And one of the things that we talk about, adding packet viewer to stuff is making it so that it's not quite so esoteric, right? So that somebody who um, is more junior or at least isn't familiar with the process as much has fewer steps to go through before they could start getting used to looking at them
Yeah.
and being comfortable with it, you know? Like, do you see that happening? Is it effective? Are more people like
Well, it's funny you ask that. Like, it is getting. Well, I'd say if I look at a security like professional, they usually start with the higher level data. Am I seeing indicators that look like they're unusual? But at the end of the day, here's what I've come to find: the real threat hunters get to packets for one reason. It's the truth. You can say, I think I have an attack based on log data. But we know, and we've proven this, that attackers can alter logs.
Mhm.
But they can't alter the packet they sent. They can alter it before they send it, but once it's sent, it's like CCTV.
Mhm.
I saw you walk that way. Like you can try and alter it after the fact, but I recorded it.
Right, right, right,
And
right, right.
we are seeing a lot more investigators that are on the security side getting to that level of detail, because once you have a hypothesis and a theory, you've got to prove that it's true, and you can't prove that it's true by, you know, informing the conclusion of some data. You have to look at, well, what actually happened? Is my hypothesis true? Let me look at the data, and the data inside the packets is really where you have to get to. So I see that more on companies that need to get to the bottom of what happened.
Mhm.
There's going to be organizations out there that don't need that level of depth for sure. Okay, all
Right,
I need to
right.
know is I got attacked. I stopped it and I fixed it. I don't need to know how, why, or when. But more and more now, because the adversaries are changing quickly, you want to be able to know how they did it, what they did, where they went, so you can shore it up for the next attempt.
Right, 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 right. Right. And then, pass that information along,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know. And use the captures as the evidence to sort of teach people
That's
about it, right?
exactly what I see more now. Is the captures are the true evidence.
Right.
Right? Getting stats off devices, or looking at metadata, is that really getting the evidence? No, it's getting inference. I can have an inference that there was an attack, but getting the packets, like I know there was an attack, so I can see it right here.
Right, right, right. Yeah. No, and it's like I said, I think it's encouraging that people are at least, more it's we talk about the skills gap
Hmm.
isn't it's like it's just that there's no middle, right? So it's like I was talking to Chris Greer about this. It's like you have experts, right, with a lot of legacy and experience, and then
Yep.
you have newbies that are very, very on board to learn this stuff, but
Yes.
there's this sort of like trough in the middle,
Oh,
right?
there is. There totally is. It is hard to cross that chasm of, I understand attacks. I can see what's happening on the network through log data, or I can see, some triggers got executed. But to get to the level of depth where I can now go and look at the packets and see and prove that yes, this attack happened because of these things in the packets, that's a huge chasm. I don't know how we solve for that. Like me personally, when I was going through that experience, I was kind of thrown into, like, you've got a sniffer, you've got to figure out the problem. So I had to start figuring out, and at that time there was no internet to go research how to read a packet. I had to figure it out on my own using textbooks and just do my own research. And how do I understand what an Ethernet header looks like versus a token ring header, which none of you people care about anymore? How do I know if it's a big packet, small packet, what's
Full
inside
keen ring? What?
it? Yeah, exactly. Lord of the Rings? No, no, no. It's a world away now. Thankfully, it's all Ethernet.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It makes me happy. But so like one of the things that I've always been curious about, like just from, you know, working for who I work for and being like a layer of separation from the end users a little bit
Hmm.
is like what we end up telling them, right? Because the decision to add packet analysis to a solution, right? It's like nobody would do it if there wasn't customer demand for it. Maybe, right? But there's also an
That's
element of,
true.
hey, maybe you probably need this, right?
Yeah. Well, we find, so a few folks from our customer base joined us recently as product managers. Actually, they've been here over a year now, and they're young. They're early in their career and they're super talented, but they realize that packets is where you need to get to, and both of them came from the SOC analyst side. So they were analysts at large firms
Cool.
that were doing the threat hunting and investigation, and they knew. However, they got there, either they were told by someone who had the knowledge, or they just realized, like, I've got to get to the packet level data to see. I hunted all the way down to this conclusion. How do I validate it? And they were early in using packets, and so these are people in their very younger side of their career had to get to packets to get to the truth. And I think that's
Cool.
something that we're seeing more of. Is if I'll go back to another story in my career. We had this. I was working for a company. I was head of products for this company. Some of you may have heard of it, called FireEye.
Oh, yeah.
I was chief product officer back in its startup phase, going public, and there'll be a parallel here. I'll get you there. We when people would deploy our products, the standard operating procedure, if you had a detection, was let's re-image the endpoint that was the one that triggered the detection, because there's obviously an attack. Well, fast forward later on, people started realizing that's not the right thing to do, because what triggered in the sandbox was not exactly the same as the endpoint. Maybe the endpoint had antivirus that would have protected against that attack, or it had something else that would protect against that attack. So because it's not a mirror image, you might be giving false positives and then causing a downstream effect. And I think that's where people get to, where they see the need for packets. Like, I shouldn't be shutting down my network, taking people offline because I think I saw a ransomware attack.
Oh, that's a super good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I should get to the packets to see, did the ransomware land, did it encrypt, and did it exfiltrate? And you can have an assumption because maybe a ransomware trigger went off on the endpoint's EDR. Maybe. Did everything else happen as well? I have a great story about this, actually. It was a real life experience with one of our customers. So we had our product in this customer environment. They also had an EDR product in there. EDR triggered, ransomware hit, and that it did. Ransomware did hit, and so they had a system that had encrypted data. So their initial standard operating procedure was shut everything down. We're going to reimage everything. We're going to go back to before we believe the ransomware hit. And luckily, they had our product in there. And our products, if people don't know what it does, it uses packets to collect data and then give you detections on what people are doing in your network. And so because we were monitoring the network with our solution, the partner in this case that was selling these solutions to this customer said, hold on, before you go and shut the network down and reimage everything, which would have been a huge impact to this organization's customers. They said, let's look at the Extrahop data and see, where did the ransomware land and where did it go after that? Maybe it went everywhere, but we can tell because we can get to the packet level data and we can reconstruct all those experiences. And so what they did, went into our console, they said, yep, we saw the ransomware land and it touched these 3 systems that were of no consequence. And that's as far as it got. So let's do this. Let's isolate those 3 systems, 4 including the first victim, and re-image those. So they avoided a complete shutdown, which would have shut down the network for about a week, we estimated. Huge amount of loss. And we just isolated 4 systems, and they re-imaged those, and they were done.
Just by looking at the packets.
Just by looking at the packets that we inform to give our data, but we all the way back down to the packets if you want. And that's what we did. We gave them the information they needed at the highest level, and they went all the way to the packets to verify. Like, we don't need to go and redo the whole network. We just need to isolate these 4 systems. And that was a huge victory for the ability to see the packet level data and inform, where did the adversary go, or where did the ransomware go once it landed. And you could really cool if you were just using statistical data off, metadata off the
Right. Yeah. And it's like you said, a lot of these processes were in place because the ability to do that wasn't there, the knowledge to do that wasn't there, or it just never occurred to people that it's easier if we just wipe it.
Yeah, well, that's your knee-jerk reaction, right? Once you have a ransomware incident, like, oh crap, we don't know where it's gone. But if you have the ability and you're monitoring the network like we are through our customers, or they do it themselves with our equipment, they can see instantly, well, where else did that victim or now become the attacker go in my network? Oh, it only went to these 3 places. Fine, we're good. That was a huge just endorsement of the ability to monitor data, use packets as that starting point, and inform the rest.
Right.
Great story.
Cool. That's awesome. The last thing I'd want to ask you about was because I saw your LinkedIn profile picture and saw that you had the helmet on. And I was like, he's a pilot.
I am a
Because
pilot.
my cousin is,
Okay.
and he's taken me up in a very small plane before,
Like I
and it
said,
was a very sobering experience.
yeah. So I got into flying in my 20s again, like all crazy stuff we do. Still to this day, I'm a pilot. I've been flying for 20, 25, 26 years, maybe 28 years. I can never remember. And like all my stories, it's not the straight linear. I got my pilot's license, started flying small airplanes. I got my pilot's license and realized I really enjoy the more extreme stuff. So I got into stunt flying, aerobatics. Straight away.
Oh, really?
Got my license, and the first thing I did was I went and signed up for an aerobatic course. I got my endorsement to do aerobatics, and I started competing. And for over what were we in? Over 25, over 28, probably 30 years now, I've been doing almost exclusively stunt flying.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I own a Russian single seat stunt plane that's designed for competition. That's my getaway. Right now, it's grounded because I had an engine failure when I was flying, doing some stunts. I landed fine. I always practice my stuff near an airport. We call it aerobatics. We're not really stunting. We're aerobatics. It's a process, and we do the crazy flips and rolls, and I love that stuff. I love pulling high Gs, and I love but it's all planned and executed on plan. And so I had an engine failure, landed at an airport, had to dismantle it, bring it back to my home airport, and it's still there today in pieces because I'm trying to figure out how to get it back together. And I didn't crash. I landed successfully, rolled off the runway, parked it, but the engine was demolished, and so I'm trying to get that back in the air. And at the same time, I'm building a stunt kit jet airplane on the other side of this wall.
I was going to say, like, we're talking about, like, how many Gs have you experienced? Are you?
So far, the most I pull, but it's not like a fighter pilot where they pull sustained G. So you can pull
Right.
Force, and if it's quick, it's okay. My G meter is maxed out about 7 3/4, almost 8. Positive, negative 4.5. I hate negative. Negative's terrible. Negatives when you like roll
Is it really?
down. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then instead of like, if you do a loop, all the centrifugal force is pulling you down in the seat. If you roll the airplane upside down and do that same loop, the centrifugal force is ripping you out of the canopy, out of the seat. And so all the pressure's on the seat belts. And it's just all the blood goes to your head, and it's a horrible experience. But we do negative Gs. And yeah, I do high velocity, positive Gs, and love it.
That is so cool. I never could have done it because I until I got LASIK, I had terrible vision, right?
Yeah.
Like, terrible vision. And so there was no way that I could have ever gotten into it, but I've always liked to live vicariously.
Yeah, it's only recently I started wearing glasses. I've been great, but I don't usually want to fly. Long distance is great for me. It's just reading.
Yeah. Oh, for reading, yeah. No, because you get LASIK, you still lose your reading vision. So it's like
yeah. I can still see all my instruments, and when you're flying aerobatics, it's less about instruments, more about what's outside.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's actually kind of nice.
We still need to know certain things like airspeed and altitude because we don't want to go too slow and do something and be too close to the ground and do something. But in general, you kind of get a
well, and I feel like all of these harrowing experiences maybe it's just because you're Australian, but I feel like all of these harrowing experiences you had in the past, like either, not correlation versus cause, but,
yeah. Maybe I have a propensity for dangerous stuff.
Because the thing that made me realize the different mindset you have to have entirely about life when you're a pilot is when I was flying with my cousin, and we were like just going over the lakes region in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah,
and there's this very small landing strip that we were going to take a break at, right?
Yep.
And he's coming down, and the wind shear just started getting really bad, right?
Yeah.
But he didn't say anything to me, right? we almost get down and we're almost going to land. And he goes, nope, we're not doing
No, we're
this.
not
And
doing
he's
it. Yeah. Yep.
like, what?
Yep. I've done that.
No, we're not doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember once I was taking off at a four-seater. I was taking off out of Vegas with my brother, and the wind was really awful. And we had a clearance, and I was flying instrument rated. And I basically, as I'm getting to the runway, and there's a reason for this. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but the engine oil starts shooting up into the red. I'm like, well, I'm not going to take off like that. First, what I don't want to have is a hot engine with hot oil and then add full power and take off into the air. And then I asked for wasn't a cancellation, but I asked for a pause, and I go back to a holding area. And as soon as I turn around, the engine oil temperature goes back down to the green. I'm like, oh, I see, because there's so much wind. It's behind me when I'm taxiing to the takeoff point. There's no air coming over the engine to cool it. So I told my brother, and he doesn't know anything about flying. I'm like, and I told him why I was turning around. Like, that engine looks too hot. And so I kind of calculated in my mind, I know what's going on. I'm going to take off because I guarantee within a minute of getting in the air, it's going to cool way down. And so I tell my brother, I'm like, okay, we're going to go back out and do it again. He's like, what? Well, we can get Southwest. We can go home. It's fine. And he's in Australia. He lives in Australia. He was visiting. And so I'm like, no, watch this. We're going to get to the end of the runway. It's going to get hot again. I'm going to turn around, take off. It's going to cool down. He's like, are you sure? Sure enough. As soon as I get off, like less than 30 seconds, the needle comes back down way into the green. I'm like, yeah, it was just we had no airflow over the engine.
Nerves of steel.
Different mindset. You just got to...
Different mindset. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
This is like the meat of exactly what I want this show to be about. So it was perfect. This is great.
You got it. No problem.
By all means, if you have any questions for Anthony about any of these experiences, do put them in the comments in this, and hit subscribe if you haven't yet, so you can keep getting the updates like this. This is awesome. I say this a lot, but I especially mean it this time. Own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, Anthony.
You got it. Thanks.